New York City, the Big Apple. It's known for its iconic skyline, Broadway shows, and Rikers Island? Yeah, not so glamorous. Rikers Island, a 413-acre island in the East River, has been synonymous with incarceration for almost a century. Established in 1932, it was initially intended to be a temporary solution to overcrowding in other city jails. However, decade after decade, Rikers Island grew, eventually becoming one of the largest and most notorious jail complexes in the world. Rikers houses a diverse population of inmates, including those awaiting trial and those serving short sentences. Over the years, Rikers Island has been the subject of countless lawsuits, investigations, and exposés, all highlighting the inhumane conditions, rampant violence, and alleged corruption. The island itself, once a dumping ground, seems to mirror the disregard for those incarcerated within its walls. Rikers Island's legacy is one of despair, violence, and neglect. Life inside Rikers Island is a stark departure from the bustling metropolis just across the East River. For the thousands of individuals incarcerated there, daily existence is regimented, restrictive, and often terrifying. Cells are often overcrowded and dilapidated, lacking basic necessities such as adequate ventilation, natural light, and sanitation. The lack of privacy and constant noise contribute to a sense of sensory overload and psychological distress. Beyond the physical constraints, inmates at Rikers endure a pervasive atmosphere of fear and violence. Gang activity, inmate-on-inmate assaults, and alleged excessive force by correctional officers are persistent problems. Access to essential services such as medical care, mental health treatment, and educational programs is often inadequate. Rikers Island has gained notoriety for its deeply ingrained culture of violence and neglect. Inmate-on-inmate violence is rampant, fueled by gang activity, overcrowding, and a lack of adequate supervision. Fights, stabbings, and sexual assaults are tragically common occurrences. Equally disturbing are the allegations of excessive force and abuse perpetrated by correctional officers. Inmates have reported being beaten, choked, and pepper-sprayed without justification. The power imbalance between guards and inmates creates an environment ripe for exploitation and abuse. The lack of accountability for perpetrators allows the cycle of violence to continue unchecked. The grim realities of Rikers Island are further underscored by the stark statistics surrounding its inmate population. As of 2021, Rikers Island housed an average daily population of over 5,000 inmates, a significant decrease from its peak in the 1990s but still exceeding its intended capacity. The majority of those incarcerated are Black and Hispanic men, reflecting the deep-rooted racial disparities within the criminal justice system. A staggering proportion of Rikers inmates suffer from mental health issues. Estimates suggest that nearly 40% of the population has a diagnosed mental illness, with many more likely suffering in silence. The lack of adequate mental health services within the facility exacerbates these conditions, leading to increased violence, self-harm, and suicide attempts. This prolonged detention, often in harsh and isolating conditions, can have devastating consequences for individuals' mental health, employment prospects, and family ties. Section 5. The Call for Closure, a controversial chapter. In recent years, the call to close Rikers Island has gained significant momentum, fueled by growing outrage over the jail complex's inhumane conditions and systemic failures. Advocates for closure argue that Rikers is beyond reform, and that its very existence perpetuates a cycle of violence, trauma, and injustice. The movement to close Rikers has garnered support from a diverse coalition of activists, politicians, and community organizations. They point to the jail's long and troubled history, the persistent allegations of abuse, and the exorbitant costs associated with maintaining such a sprawling and outdated facility. However, the proposal to close Rikers has also faced opposition. Some argue that closure would merely shift the problem elsewhere, potentially leading to overcrowding in other jails or increased reliance on incarceration. The debate over the future of Rikers Island is complex and multifaceted. Section 6. A Glimmer of Hope, Reform Efforts and Their Challenges. Despite the deeply entrenched problems at Rikers Island, there have been some efforts to implement reforms aimed at improving conditions and reducing violence. One notable reform effort has been the reduction in the use of solitary confinement, particularly for young people and those with mental illness. Solitary confinement, often referred to as the hole, involves isolating individuals in small, windowless cells for 23 hours a day, with minimal human contact. Another positive development has been the increased use of body cameras by correctional officers. Body cameras can provide valuable evidence in cases of alleged abuse or excessive force, promoting accountability and transparency. However, concerns remain about the implementation and oversight of body camera programs. Section 7, Mental Health Behind Bars, a crisis at Rikers. With an estimated 40% of the inmate population suffering from a diagnosed mental health condition, Rikers has become the largest mental health facility in New York City, a dubious distinction for a jail complex ill-equipped to provide adequate care. The stressful and often traumatic environment of incarceration can exacerbate existing conditions, while the lack of access to timely and appropriate mental health treatment can lead to a downward spiral. Many inmates arrive at Rikers already struggling with mental health issues, often stemming from poverty, trauma, and lack of access to care in their communities. Once incarcerated, they may face long wait times for mental health evaluations and treatment, inadequate medication management, and a shortage of qualified mental health professionals. Section 8, From Rikers to Rehabilitation, Reintegration into Society. The challenges faced by those incarcerated at Rikers Island do not end upon their release. Reintegration into society after even a short period of detention can be daunting, particularly for individuals who have experienced the trauma and stigma associated with incarceration. Many former Rikers inmates face significant obstacles as they attempt to rebuild their lives. The stigma of a criminal record can make it difficult to secure employment, housing, and education opportunities. Recognizing the need to break this cycle, there have been some efforts to provide re-entry services to former Rikers inmates. These programs offer assistance with job training, housing placement, substance abuse treatment, and mental health counseling. However, much more needs to be done to support the successful reintegration of formerly incarcerated individuals into society. Section 9. The Future of Justice. Alternatives to Incarceration. Alternatives to incarceration, such as restorative justice programs, community-based treatment centers, and diversion programs, offer promising pathways to address crime while promoting rehabilitation and reducing recidivism. Restorative justice programs focus on repairing the harm caused by crime by bringing together victims, offenders, and community members in a facilitated dialogue. This approach emphasizes accountability, healing, and the restoration of relationships. Community-based treatment centers provide an alternative to incarceration for individuals with mental health issues, substance abuse disorders, or other needs that cannot be adequately addressed in a traditional jail setting. These centers offer a range of services, including counseling, therapy, medication management, and life skills training. Diversion programs aim to keep individuals, particularly first-time offenders and those charged with nonviolent offenses, out of the criminal justice system altogether. Section 10. The Human Cost of Rikers. Stories from the Inside. Behind the statistics and policy debates surrounding Rikers Island lie the deeply personal stories of individuals whose lives have been forever marked by their experiences within its walls. There is the story of Kalief Browder, a 16-year-old boy who spent 3 years at Rikers awaiting trial for allegedly stealing a backpack. During his time at Rikers, Browder endured over 800 days in solitary confinement and countless beatings by guards and inmates. He was released in 2013 without ever being convicted of a crime, but tragically took his own life 2 years later, unable to escape the psychological scars of his ordeal. There is the story of Layleen Polanco, a 27-year-old transgender woman who died in solitary confinement at Rikers in 2019. Polanco, who suffered from epilepsy, was found unresponsive in her cell after being held in solitary for nearly 3 weeks. These stories, and countless others like them, paint a harrowing picture of the human cost of Rikers Island. Section 11. A Call to Action. What can be done? The crisis at Rikers Island is a complex and multifaceted problem that demands a comprehensive and sustained response. Addressing the systemic issues that plague this notorious jail complex requires a multi-pronged approach involving policymakers, community leaders, advocates, and citizens alike. One crucial step is to reduce the jail's population by implementing alternatives to incarceration for nonviolent offenders, expanding diversion programs, and reforming bail policies that disproportionately impact low-income communities and people of color. Improving conditions within Rikers is essential to ensuring the safety and well-being of both inmates and staff. This includes addressing overcrowding, increasing access to mental health and medical care, and implementing stricter measures to prevent violence and abuse. Investing in re-entry services is crucial to breaking the cycle of incarceration. Ultimately, the closure of Rikers Island is the only way to truly turn the page on its dark